The cranberry sauce was still simmering when Taylor's phone buzzed again. 7th time that morning. I stood in the doorway, wooden spoon in my hand, and watched the way his face lit up. A brightness I hadn't seen in months. And not for me. "Could you help me with the turkey?" I called, wrestling with the 20-pound bird I'd been tending since dawn. The kitchen smelled of sage, butter, and roasted skin, just like my mother's kitchen when I was a girl. I'd been up since 5. Determined. This Thanksgiving had to be perfect. "In a minute," he muttered, head bent, fingers flying across the screen. I carried the turkey myself, the weight digging into my lower back. 47 years old. Married 23. And still, I was the only one carrying this family. But I swallowed the sting. Today wasn't about me. Today was about family. Hunter had driven in last night from Chicago. He looked sharp in his new suit jacket, though his eyes were heavy with exhaustion. His job drained him, but he showed up. Faith blew in that morning like a storm, arms full of wine, laughter, and stories from grad school. Seeing them both at the table again made every aching hour in the kitchen worth it. The dining room was a picture pulled from memory. My grandmother's china, the delicate blue we saved for moments like this. A centerpiece I'd spent hours arranging, miniature pumpkins, autumn leaves, battery candles flickering like small, stubborn flames. Taylor had walked by 3 times. Not a word. "Mom, this stuffing is incredible," Hunter said, already reaching for seconds. "Is this Grandma's recipe?" With a few changes, I smiled, watching him savor. I added dried cherries. Faith lifted her glass.
"To Mom."
Another Thanksgiving miracle. Her cheeks flushed with wine, her eyes alive. She looked so young, so full of promise. My chest ached with pride. We clinked glasses. For a moment, everything was right. This was why I folded napkins at 6 a.m. Why I hand-mashed potatoes until my arms burned. For this, warmth, laughter, belonging. Then his phone buzzed again. He looked at it, and something shifted. "You okay, Dad?" Faith asked. "Fine," he said too quickly, sliding it away. His leg bounced under the table. His shoulders squared. His throat cleared. I knew those tells. The man I'd built my life beside was preparing to deliver a blow. "Actually," he said, pushing his chair back. The scrape against the hardwood cut the air like a blade. My children froze, forks in midair. Taylor stood tall, his voice rehearsed, smooth like a salesman's pitch. "I have something to tell everyone." "Taylor." My voice was small, a warning. "Can't this wait until after dinner?"
He didn't look at me.
"I'm selling the house." The words hit like a physical strike. Faith's wine glass stilled midair. Hunter's fork clattered to his plate. "What?" Faith whispered. Taylor's gaze fixed somewhere beyond us. His voice steady, detached, like he was presenting quarterly numbers. "Holly and the kids need more space. Jack's 8. Joel's 6. Elise just turned 4. They're growing fast. Her apartment's too small." Silence swallowed the room. I could hear the refrigerator hum, the clock tick, my heartbeat pounding in my ears.
"Holly."
He said her name here, at my table, on Thanksgiving. Hunter's face drained of color. "Dad, what are you talking about?" "Holly's my girlfriend," Taylor said, as if discussing the weather. "We've been together 8 months. She has 3 kids. They need stability. A real home." Faith made a sound like someone had punched the breath from her lungs. "Girlfriend." I sat perfectly still, hands folded in my lap, watching my children break apart in front of me. This was how he chose to tell them. Not gently, not privately, not with care. A transaction. A deal. "The house will sell quickly in this market," he went on, blind to the wreckage. Holly found a beautiful place in Westfield. 5 bedrooms. Big backyard. Great schools. The kids will love it. Faith's voice was a whisper, shredded. "What about us?" I didn't speak. Not yet. My silence was the only thing holding me together. My hand slipped into my purse. My fingers touched the envelope I'd placed there days ago. A plan of my own. If he wanted announcements, I had one too. What about Mom? The question cut through the silence, sharp as glass. Finally, he looked at me. Defiance flickered in his eyes, like he was daring me to react.
Cry.
Scream.
Beg.
Give him the chance to label me hysterical. The unhinged wife standing in the way of his happiness. But I didn't. I rose slowly, steady, deliberate. My heels clicked against the floor as I crossed to the counter, where my purse waited. My hands didn't tremble as I reached inside. I'd been carrying that envelope for 3 weeks, waiting for the right time, or maybe for the cruelest time. And here it was. I walked back, slid the envelope onto the table, directly in front of him, right over the gravy stain he'd left during his little performance. Since you're making announcements, I said softly, finally locking eyes with him. Then I sat, picked up my fork, took a bite of sweet potatoes. They tasted like ash, but I chewed anyway. The envelope lay between us like a live grenade. For the first time all evening, Taylor faltered. His fingers hovered above the cream-colored paper, like it might burn him. The smug certainty, the polished confidence, it was gone. Replaced by hesitation.
Fear.
What is it, Dad? Hunter's voice sliced through the air. His fork rested untouched. His jaw was tight, his stare fixed on the man he thought he knew. The father he'd looked up to his whole life was suddenly a stranger. Taylor turned the envelope over. My careful cursive spelled his name. The same handwriting I'd used on every anniversary card, every birthday note for over 20 years. Except this one felt different. Final. Jordan, what? His words trailed off when he met my gaze. I gave him nothing.
No hint. No merci.
Let him sweat. Let him feel a fraction of the dread he'd handed me. Faith was staring at both of us, her glass forgotten in her hand.
Mom?
Are you okay? Her voice was soft, frightened. My daughter, still reeling from the wreckage her father had just dropped on her life. I reached across the table, wrapped her free hand in mine.
Ai fine, sweetheart.
And I meant it. For the first time in months, I felt in control. Taylor tucked the envelope into his jacket without opening it, relief flickering across his face like a fool who thought avoidance was safety. But I saw the way his hand kept drifting back to his pocket. The weight of that envelope gnawed at him. Aren't you going to open it? Hunter asked, voice edged with steel. Later, Taylor muttered, reaching for his water, his throat dry. The atmosphere shifted. Warmth had evaporated. The table, once filled with laughter and connection, was now thick with unease. Faith's eyes moved between us, searching for answers she didn't yet have. Hunter sat rigid, no longer eating, every muscle locked tight. I cut another piece of turkey, savored it. Perfectly roasted.
Moist.
Every hour of labor in that kitchen still mattered. If nothing else, this meal would be unforgettable. So, I said casually, my voice a quiet blade, how long has Holly been helping you decide what happens in our home? Taylor's fork slipped, clattering against his plate. Jordan, not now. When then? I asked, still calm. After you've packed my clothes? After you've changed the locks? Faith's glass hit the table, harder than she meant. Her voice cracked. You're really doing this? You're leaving Mom for some woman with kids? It's complicated, Taylor offered, the empty excuse of a man too weak to admit the truth. No, Hunter cut in, his tone sharp. It's not complicated at all. That's when the phone started buzzing. He looked down and there it was. Her name, glowing on the screen. Holly. She couldn't even give us one night. Couldn't let him destroy his family without clawing for his attention mid-meal. Answer it, I said quietly. Don't let us keep you from your priorities. He declined, his face flushed, his excuses ready. It's work. Faith laughed, bitter, joyless. On Thanksgiving? At 7 o'clock. The phone buzzed again. And again. Taylor's composure cracked. His leg bounced wildly under the table, his hand pressing against the envelope like it might anchor him. You know what? Hunter shoved back his chair, the napkin sliding to the floor. He stood, towering, his disappointment so heavy it pressed against all of us. I've lost my appetite. His eyes burned into his father's face. 23 years of marriage. 23 years of family. And you stand here, announce your affair like you're talking about business strategy. Hunter, you don't understand. I understand perfectly, he said, his voice like ice. You decided your happiness was worth more than Mom's dignity, worth more than our traditions, worth more than looking your children in the eye without lying. Taylor opened his mouth, but Hunter was already gone. His footsteps pounded up the stairs, followed by the sharp click of his bedroom door closing. Faith sat frozen, her eyes shimmering with tears she refused to let fall. And I just kept eating. Daddy. Faith's voice cracked on the word. A name she hadn't called him in years, spoken now, like a plea from the child she used to be. How could you do this to us? For one fleeting second, Taylor's mask slipped. Regret crossed his face, raw, real, undeniable. A flicker of pain at wounding his daughter. But then his phone buzzed again, shattering the moment. This time he answered. He turned away from us, his voice low. I can't talk right now. But Faith, and I could hear her.
Holly.
Her voice sharp, insistent, angry at being ignored. We couldn't make out the words, but the tone was unmistakable. She was demanding, impatient. The sound of another woman pushing her way into my family's Thanksgiving dinner. I said I can't talk, Taylor repeated, strained. He hung up, placed the phone face down like it was something shameful. The silence after was heavy, deafening. Faith's eyes stayed on him, wide and hollow. She looked at her father like she was meeting a stranger for the very first time. I kept eating. The scrape of my fork against porcelain filled the void. Sometimes silence carried more weight than words ever could. I think I need some air. Faith rose carefully, each movement measured, as though one wrong shift might cause her to break. Mom, do you want help clearing the table? That's all right, sweetheart, I said gently. Go. Breathe. She left. And then it was just us. Taylor and me. Two people sitting across from each other at the same table where we'd shared birthdays, Christmas mornings, Sunday dinners. Countless plans, countless promises. Now it was a battlefield. And in his pocket, that envelope pulsed like a live bomb. Jordan, he finally said. We need to talk. I looked at him. Really looked. When had his face become that of a stranger? When had the man I'd trusted with my whole heart turned into someone who could dismantle his family with the casual cruelty of a man ordering dessert? No, I said simply. I stood, stacking plates. We really don't. That night, I went to bed early. Turned the lock. I heard him downstairs pacing, restless, his footsteps echoing like guilt itself. Probably working up the nerve to open the envelope. Let him pace. Let him wonder. For once, the torment belonged to him. And me? I slept better than I had in months. The morning after Thanksgiving, the house was empty. Taylor had slipped out before dawn, still avoiding the truth pressing against his chest pocket. I brewed coffee in the quiet kitchen. Steam rose from the mug as memories I'd been burying for months finally clawed their way back. It had started in March. An ordinary Tuesday. Or so I thought. Taylor came home late, 3 hours late. His collar wrinkled, his excuse rehearsed. Client meeting ran long. I'd microwaved his dinner, asked about his day, listened to his tired words like the perfect, trusting wife. But something felt wrong. His eyes didn't meet mine. He showered immediately, instead of collapsing on the couch the way he usually did. Small things. Tiny cracks. The late nights multiplied. Big presentation tomorrow. Don't wait up. I'd lie awake, watching the clock shift from midnight to 1. From 1 to 2. When I questioned him, he sighed like I was the problem. Like my doubt was the insult, not his absence. By April, it wasn't just late nights. It was canceled plans. Our anniversary dinner at Chez Laurent, the same restaurant where he'd asked me to marry him, vanished under the excuse of a client emergency. My birthday theater tickets went unused. Suddenly, there was always a flight, always a crisis, always later. Later never came. That's when Holly Morrison entered our lives. At first, just a name, casual, professional, Holly thinks we should restructure the reports. Holly suggested a new system. Just another colleague. Another voice he seemed to value too much. And then I saw her. The first photo didn't scare me. Office Christmas party. A group shot. Holly, blonde, petite, glowing, standing just close enough to catch my eye. Younger, fresher, untouched by the years that had carved lines across my face. The second photo broke me. Taylor and Holly in a coffee shop. Her 3 children gathered close, her hand resting on his arm like it belonged there. A little girl perched on his lap, as if she had always known him. And the worst part? He was smiling. A smile I hadn't seen in years. I found it by accident, scrolling his phone to check the weather. The photo was dated on a Saturday. He claimed to be golfing with Marcus, his college buddy. Who are these children? I'd asked that night, showing him the screen. My voice calm, giving him every chance to tell the truth. He barely glanced before launching into his script. That's Holly from work. She's going through a messy divorce. Needed someone to talk to. Those are her kids. Cute, right? Poor things are struggling. His words were smooth, practiced. Too smooth. He even played the role of compassionate savior. But I noticed the way he snatched the phone back. The way his thumb darted, deleting the photo without hesitation. You're helping her with her divorce? I pressed. Gentle, controlled. Someone has to. His voice carried a sharp edge. The kind of tone that ended conversations. She doesn't have many friends, Jordan. And in that moment, I felt the first fracture split wide open. Sometimes people just need support during hard times, he told me. And I wanted to believe him. Desperately. So I silenced the unease clawing at my chest. I chose trust over suspicion. Because this was Taylor. My Taylor. The man who brought me coffee in bed on Sundays. The man who remembered my favorite wine without needing to be asked. The man who, for decades, had been my partner, my comfort, my safe place. But then came the phone calls. And the name. Always her name. Holly. Lighting up his screen at dinner. During morning coffee. Even during Hunter's graduation ceremony. The vibration, the glow, the quick glance at her name. Then the frown as he let it go to voicemail. She's having a rough time, he'd say. Probably needs advice about the custody battle. The custody battle that didn't exist. Holly had been divorced 3 years. I would find that out later. One evening in July, Faith called while Taylor was upstairs working. We were chatting about her internship when she mentioned casually, I saw Dad at the park near my apartment. He was with some woman. And her kids. Playing on the swings. Looked like a family. My heart stilled. What did she look like? Blonde.
Pretty.
Younger than you. A pause. The kids were adorable. 2 boys and a little girl. Dad was pushing the girl on the swing. She was giggling so hard. It was sweet. But what, honey? I forced my voice calm. It was weird. Seeing Dad with someone else's kids. He looked so natural. Like it wasn't the first time. And the way she looked at him, her voice trailed off. Mom, is everything okay between you and Dad?
Elite. Smoothly.
Protecting her. Protecting myself. Everything's fine, sweetheart. Dad probably just ran into a coworker and her kids. You know how he is with children. She accepted it. Hung up. But I sat in the dark living room for hours. Staring into the shadows. Letting every piece of the puzzle I'd been refusing to see click together. The late nights. The canceled plans. The constant calls. The photos. And now my daughter witnessing my husband playing father to another woman's children. That's when I stopped fighting for his attention. And started paying attention instead. I listened more closely. To the careful tones of his explanations. To the tiny inconsistencies in his stories. I studied his face when his phone rang. Watched his expression shift depending on who it was. I documented the changes in our finances. Withdrawals without explanation. Restaurant charges I'd never seen. Cash vanishing with no reason at all. Then in September he said the word. Downsizing. Casual. Over breakfast. As if discussing the weather. Housing market's hot right now. Might be smart to downsize while we can get top dollar. He didn't look up from his tablet. I knew then. He wasn't downsizing with me. He was upsizing with her. But Taylor made a fatal mistake in his deception. He underestimated me. He assumed I was the passive, trusting wife who would swallow every excuse, who would sit silently as he dismantled our life piece by piece. He had no idea I'd already sat across from Clayton Richards, one of the toughest divorce attorneys in the state. Clayton's office smelled of leather and expensive cologne. Power hung in the air, the kind of place where lives were dissected with precision. I sat across from his gleaming mahogany desk, my hands folded as he reviewed the file I'd built. Bank statements, credit card records, photos printed from social media. A parallel life, documented in detail. Mrs. Davidson, he said, his silver hair catching the late afternoon light. Are you certain you want to proceed this way? Yes, I answered, steady. I need to protect myself. And my children. My husband thinks I'm naive. I'd prefer to keep it that way. For now. What I didn't tell him was how I'd found Holly's online life. Ironically, it had been Faith who first mentioned it. Dad's coworker is always posting family pictures, she said one day. Makes me miss being little. The name stuck. Holly Morrison. One evening, while Taylor was working late, I searched. And there it was. Her profile was a carefully curated storybook. Photos of her children at parks I recognized. Restaurants Taylor had mentioned for client lunches. Even the ice cream parlor where he used to take Hunter and Faith when they were small. But it wasn't just the places. It was the captions. Sunday adventures with my favorite people, she wrote under a picture of her daughter on the same swing set where Taylor had pushed Faith 20 years ago. A little girl laughing, blonde pigtails flying, while a man's hands, his hands, the ones I'd know anywhere, steadied her. Another photo. Her boys building sandcastles on the beach. Caption. Teaching them that new beginnings can be beautiful. Posted the same weekend Taylor claimed to be at a mandatory work retreat. And there, blurred in the background but undeniable, was Taylor's blue polo shirt. The one hanging in our closet, the evidence was right there. The betrayal documented for anyone to see. He wasn't just living a double life. He was rehearsing a replacement. The post that gutted me came in October. A photograph. Simple. Intimate. A small dinner table lit by soft candlelight. Holly's children in matching pajamas. Their tiny faces glowing in the warmth of the flame. A man seated among them, his face deliberately cropped out of the frame. The caption, grateful for the man who shows my babies what real love looks like. Some people come into your life and make you realize what you've been missing. 37 likes. 12 comments. Friends and family celebrating her happiness. Congratulating her on finding someone special. I sat frozen before my laptop, the screen burning into my eyes, my chest tightening until I could barely breathe. My mind kept circling one thought. How many of these people know her special someone is married? But it wasn't the photos that exposed the depth of Taylor's betrayal. It was the money. Bills at home piling up unpaid. Our credit cards stretched to the limit. And then statements I'd never seen. I stumbled across them by accident. An envelope delivered to our address for Mr. and Mrs. T. Davidson. But the Mrs. wasn't me. My hand shook as I opened it. Inside were statements for a joint credit card. His name. Her name. Together. The transactions painted the picture of a life. Their life. Grocery stores. Toy shops. Children's clothing. $600 at Little Dreamers Furniture. Bunk beds, no doubt, for her boys. $400 at Princess Palace Boutique. For her daughter. Meanwhile, I was dipping into my own savings to keep the lights on, covering the mortgage he claimed was delayed. Then came the receipts I found in his jacket pocket. Harmless at first glance. Target. CVS. Ordinary places. But the items told a story I couldn't ignore. Children's Tylenol. Princess and superhero Band-Aids. Bedtime storybooks. And then one that broke me. A birthday cake. White box, pink lettering across the receipt. Happy 4th birthday, Elise. He was playing father in another household, building memories with children who weren't his, while his own son and daughter wondered why their father had grown so distant. That's when I began building my case.
Piece by piece.
Screenshots of her social media posts, copies of financial statements, photos of receipts. I wasn't gathering evidence to destroy him. I was gathering it to protect myself. Because Clayton had warned me. Men like Taylor, he'd said during our second meeting, rewrite history. They frame money as business expenses. They downplay photographs as misunderstandings. They are masters at controlling the story. Your job is to make sure there's another story, one they can't erase. So every Friday I made my deposit. A manila folder tucked beneath my arm as I walked into a bank across town. A safety deposit box where I stored the truth. Evidence of a second life. My silent preparation for war. The breaking point came on our anniversary, October 15th. Once, it had meant roses, wine, and whispered promises about the future. This year, I made the reservation myself, Chez Laurent, the same place where he had proposed all those years ago. I bought a new dress. Black. The one he had once told me made me unforgettable. At 5 o'clock, I zipped the dress. At 5:30, I touched up my lipstick one last time. By 6, I was at the front door, keys in hand, ready to leave. At 6:15, the call came. Jordan. His voice rushed, apologetic. I'm so sorry. Holly's having an emergency. Complete breakdown about the custody situation. I can't leave her alone with the kids. Can we postpone? Maybe this weekend? I stood in the entryway, staring at my reflection. A woman dressed for celebration. A wife waiting for a husband who is across town, playing hero in another woman's crisis. The woman he once denied. The relationship he once minimized. The children who now meant more than the family he had built with me. My voice was calm. Ice calm. Of course. Family emergencies come first. After I hung up, I didn't take the dress off. I didn't wipe away the makeup. Instead, I drove to Chez Laurent alone. I sat at our table for two, ordered the most expensive bottle of wine on the menu, smiled politely as the waitstaff pretended not to notice. That night, in the quiet of my car, parked outside the restaurant where we'd once dreamed about forever, I called Clayton. It's time, I said simply. The next morning, while Taylor slept in, exhausted, no doubt, from his night of emotional support, I sat with Clayton and his team. For 4 hours, we mapped strategy. Step by step. Move by move. The element of surprise is your greatest advantage, Clayton told me. Men like your husband operate from a place of assumed control. They make plans under the illusion their wives will always stay passive. Predictable. But I was no longer predictable. After Thanksgiving, the house slowed to a crawl. Taylor moved through it like a ghost, the envelope still burning a hole in his pocket. He checked for it constantly, jacket, briefcase, nightstand, reassuring himself it was there. But he never opened it. I moved through my days with a calm that surprised even me. I cooked. I cleaned. I smiled when spoken to. Inside, I was already gone. And he had no idea. Mornings looked normal. Coffee brewing. News humming softly in the background. Afternoons filled with errands, the rhythm of daily life. Evenings winding down like nothing had changed. But beneath the surface, I was electric. Charged. Waiting. Every time Taylor's hand brushed that envelope. Every time he opened his mouth, then shut it again. I felt like a pianist sitting in silence before the final note, knowing exactly when to strike. It was Thursday morning, 1 week after the Thanksgiving he destroyed. I was standing at the stove, pouring batter onto the pan, when I heard him on the stairs. His footsteps were heavy, deliberate. A man walking toward a reckoning. He appeared in the doorway, the cream-colored envelope clutched in his hand, trembling like it might explode. His hair uncombed, eyes bloodshot, sleepless, hollow. Good, I thought. Jordan, he rasped, his voice broken. What is this? I flipped a pancake, smooth and steady. I didn't look at him. Open it. You'll see. The sound of paper tearing cut through the kitchen. Then the rustle of documents sliding free. Legal words. Binding signatures. The kind of paperwork that changes everything. Silence followed. A long, endless silence that pressed down on the room like a weight. Finally, he whispered, "You transferred the deed." I turned, met his eyes. His face had drained of color. His hands shook so violently the papers rattled. 3 months ago, I said calmly, almost casually, as though we were talking about the weather. Amazing how much paperwork goes unread when you're busy playing house with someone else's family.
His jaw tightened.
The hiss of rage slipped out before he could stop it. You set me up. You planned this whole thing. I sipped my coffee. Let the warmth fill me. I protected myself. There's a difference. His lips parted.
Closed.
His mind was racing. The house, he stopped. Panic flickered across his face. Holly's expecting. We've been planning. Holly's expecting a house that was never yours to give. I cut in. I placed my mug down with deliberate care. Funny how that works. Right then, his phone buzzed. Holly's name lit the screen. The color drained from his face entirely. He hesitated, then answered on the 4th ring, his voice falsely cheerful. "Hey, babe." Even across the kitchen, I could hear her.
Sharp. Direct.
"Taylor, I've been thinking about the timeline for the house sale. The kids are excited about their bedrooms. I want to start shopping for furniture. When will we have the paperwork signed?" His eyes flicked to mine. I smiled, lifted my coffee again, and waited. "Actually, Holly," he stammered, "there's been a complication." Silence. Ice-cold silence on the other end. Her voice returned, low and dangerous. "What kind of complication?" "The house isn't, technically, in my name anymore." Confusion cracked into fury. "What do you mean it's not in your name? It's your house." Taylor looked at me like I might save him. I turned back to my pancakes, hummed softly. "Jordan transferred the deed," he admitted finally. "Without telling me. I found out today." The explosion that followed was spectacular. Her voice climbed to a pitch so sharp it could have shattered glass. Words like betrayed, manipulated, lying snake. She tore into him, each syllable striking harder than the last. And then, the line that gutted him. "So, let me get this straight. You promised me and my children a home you never even owned? You made me believe in a future that didn't exist. You're just another cheating husband with nothing to offer." "Holly, please. Don't you dare, Holly, please me. I wasted 8 months of my life on you. My children believed in a life you couldn't deliver. And you lied. To all of us." The line went dead. Taylor lowered the phone slowly, staring at it as though it had bitten him. She hung up. "Shocking," I said dryly. Who could have guessed a woman searching for financial security might lose interest when the money runs out? His phone buzzed again. And again.
And again.
I couldn't see the screen, but his face told me everything. Whatever she sent, whatever she said, ended them. Then came his desperate pivot. His voice breaking. 23 years. 23 years of marriage, Jordan, and you destroy it all with paperwork. That's when I turned to him. Fully. For the first time in weeks, I let the anger show. I destroyed it. I destroyed our marriage. I slammed the spatula onto the counter, the sound sharp enough to make him flinch. "You stood in our dining room, in front of our children, and announced you were selling our home. For your girlfriend's convenience. And somehow I'm the one who ended this."
He tried to speak.
I cut him off. My voice sharp as glass. "When, Taylor? When was I supposed to talk to you? Between your late nights at the office? Your emergency calls from Holly? The lies about golf games? The secret credit cards?
Tell me.
When exactly was I supposed to talk to the stranger wearing my husband's face?" By afternoon, I watched him pace the living room, phone clutched tight, leaving voicemail after voicemail. Desperate. Begging. Hunter finally picked up on the 4th call. His voice rang clear enough for me to hear across the room. "We're standing with Mom." And then the line went dead again. "You made your choice at Thanksgiving," Hunter had told him. "We've made ours." When Taylor tried Faith that evening, her response was colder. Don't call me again until you're ready to apologize to Mom. And I mean really apologize. Not that fake corporate speech you give when you're trying to save face. By Saturday, I was standing in the same kitchen he had once promised to another woman, laying out fresh croissants, bowls of berries, and the expensive coffee I used to ration when money was tight. My book club gathered around the island, 8 women who had seen me through 2 decades of life. Their laughter rose like sunlight, filling a house that had felt haunted for months. Margaret reached for a strawberry and studied me. "Jordan, you seem lighter.
Relaxed.
You're glowing." I looked at the women who had carried me through storms, at the walls I had fought to protect, at the life that was still mine. "I feel like I've finally stopped holding my breath," I said. And for the first time in months, it was true. The divorce papers came on a Tuesday in February. A courier knocked at my door, his apologetic smile almost as heavy as the envelope in his hand. Taylor had filed first, his last attempt to control a story that was already slipping like water through his fingers. Clayton had warned me. "Men like Taylor need to believe they're in charge," he'd said during one of our strategy sessions. "Let him file. Let him think he's steering the ship. Meanwhile, we'll already be 3 steps ahead." I set the papers on the counter, without opening them. There would be time to dissect his version of our marriage later. Right then, I had a life to rebuild. By January, Taylor was gone. He packed his clothes and walked out, leaving behind 23 years of memories as if they belonged to strangers. He rented a modest apartment across town. Not the grand house he had dangled in front of Holly, but a place to lick his wounds while he regrouped. Faith mentioned later that Holly had given him an ultimatum after the breakup, proof of stability or lose her for good. Taylor, of course, chose to fight for her. Then April arrived with sunlight and betrayal dressed as news. Faith called one morning, her voice bubbling with disbelief. "Mom, you're not going to believe this. Dad's getting remarried. To Holly. In June." I nearly dropped my coffee. "Remarried? Already? I know, right? The divorce isn't even final. But apparently Holly forgave him after he promised they'd try for a baby. She wants her kids to have a sibling. And Dad's all in. A baby." At 51, Taylor was about to start all over, rewriting his life with a woman 20 years younger. The audacity left me breathless. "Are you invited?" I asked carefully. Faith's laugh was bitter. "We both were. Hunter and me. Dad even sent formal invitations, like we're distant relatives. Hunter tossed his in the trash. I might go, just to watch the circus." After we hung up, I sat in my garden for a long time, stunned. The man who once complained about diaper duty was now promising sleepless nights and bottles all over again. But something about Holly's urgency gnawed at me. She was 32, still young. Why rush? Why demand a baby so quickly? The answer came in May. I was at the grocery store, pushing my cart through the pharmacy aisle, when I spotted Holly. She was tucked against the shelves, whispering angrily into her phone. I froze. Then, against every moral instinct, I ducked behind a vitamin display and listened. "The custody agreement requires it," she snapped. "If I want to relocate the kids out of state, their father needs proof my new husband can provide for additional children. Some archaic clause about family planning and stability." My chest tightened. A fertility test. She needed Taylor to prove he could still father children. Proof to satisfy a court. Proof to secure her freedom. But Holly didn't know what I knew. She didn't know what Taylor had forgotten in the haze of his midlife fantasy. A secret buried 24 years ago. That night, I picked up the phone I had avoided for months. "Dr. Martinez? This is Jordan Davidson. I need to ask you about something confidential. About Taylor." He had been our family physician for decades. He delivered both my children, treated Taylor's blood pressure, carried pieces of our history only he remembered. "Jordan," he said warmly. "How can I help?" "Taylor's getting remarried. His new wife wants children. I need to know, does he remember the results of that fertility test he took after Faith was born?" The silence stretched so long I thought we'd been disconnected. Finally, his voice returned. Firm. Careful. "Jordan, that information is confidential. I can't discuss a patient's medical history, even with a spouse. I closed my eyes, steadied my voice. But hypothetically, if someone needed those results for legal purposes, would the records still exist? Another pause. Then, quietly, hypothetically, medical records are maintained for 30 years. And hypothetically, Dr. Martinez said, his voice careful, if someone with legal standing requested those records during a divorce proceeding, he let the words trail off. He didn't need to finish. I understood perfectly. The next morning, I called Clayton. My voice was calm, deliberate. I need you to subpoena Taylor's complete medical history. Within a week, the files were in our hands. 2 decades of checkups, prescriptions, and test results. Buried inside those pages was the secret Taylor had begged Dr. Martinez to keep hidden. A single test, done 24 years ago, when Faith was still a newborn. The irony was staggering. After Faith's difficult birth, Taylor had gone behind my back, terrified about the idea of more children. He had tested his fertility. The results were damning, severely compromised. Not impossible, but unlikely without medical help. He had never told me. Instead, he let me carry the blame for our inability to expand our family. For years, I believed it was my body that had failed us. And now, decades later, that same test was about to dismantle the new life he had promised Holly. Clayton timed everything with precision. The records would be delivered to Taylor on the morning of his wedding. Not to punish him, but because Holly's custody hearing was scheduled for the following Monday. The truth would surface at exactly the right moment. That Saturday, while Taylor dressed for vows that would never be spoken, I was in my garden, planting roses where his golf clubs had once cluttered the garage. The symbolism wasn't lost on me. He had abandoned space. I was filling it with beauty. At 4:30, my phone buzzed.
Faith.
Her voice was tight, trembling with suppressed laughter. Mom, you're not going to believe this. Try me. The wedding's off. Holly found out Dad can't have kids. She was getting her hair done when the medical records arrived. She opened them right there in the salon. By the time Dad showed up at the venue, she was already gone with her kids. Packed up. Vanished. I closed my eyes, tilted my face toward the sun, and exhaled. That's unfortunate. Faith hesitated. Mom, you wouldn't happen to know anything about those records, would you? Your father's medical history is his own business, I said truthfully. If he chose not to tell his fiancée the truth, that's between them. That evening, I sat on the porch with Hunter and Faith, a bottle of wine between us. The sky blazed with streaks of orange and violet, the kind of sunset that feels like closure. Somewhere across town, Taylor was likely sitting in an empty banquet hall, staring at untouched centerpieces, watching a future he had promised dissolve into nothing. Meanwhile, we were right where we belonged. On the porch of the home he once tried to give away, building new memories, proving that sometimes the most powerful revenge isn't loud or dramatic. It's choosing joy anyway. It's refusing to let another person's choices poison your peace. Karma, I learned, doesn't knock on your door when you expect it. But when it arrives, its timing is flawless. Months passed. Autumn arrived. One morning, an envelope appeared in my mailbox. Heavy cardstock, cream-colored, elegant script. A formal invitation. Hunter's engagement party. The date was set for the first weekend in November, at the same country club where he had learned to swim as a child. My fingers brushed over the embossed lettering. My son was stepping into his own life, his own promise of forever. Hunter had found love with Sarah, a brilliant architect with a laugh that softened him in ways I hadn't seen since he was a boy. They had been together for 2 years, but this year had changed something in them. Their bond carried weight now, permanence, partnership. Faith was thriving too. She'd graduated at the top of her class and landed a coveted job with a prestigious environmental law firm in Seattle. Her voice, in our weekly calls, carried a confidence I had never heard before. It was as if watching me rebuild had given her permission to dream without limits. And me? The house was mine now. Not just legally, spiritually. I painted the living room a soft sage green. Hung artwork I loved, without asking anyone's opinion. Turned Taylor's old office into a reading nook filled with plants, sunlight, and silence. The house breathed differently now, lighter, freer, as though the walls themselves had exhaled. Mornings became sacred. Coffee on the back porch. 20 minutes of yoga in the sunroom. Then whatever the day brought, without the tension that had once strangled me. Sometimes I gardened. Sometimes I painted watercolors that would never hang in a gallery, but filled me with quiet pride. On Wednesdays, I volunteered at the women's shelter downtown, guiding others through the labyrinth of starting over. Clayton had become more than my attorney. He had become a friend. Wise, steady, grounded. Our professional relationship had ended when the divorce papers were finalized 6 months earlier, but we still met for coffee, swapping book recommendations or debating politics. He had never remarried after his own divorce 15 years ago. Neither of us had named it, but there was a gentle possibility in our friendship, the kind that didn't demand but simply existed. Taylor's story? It took a different path. After Holly's departure, he unraveled. 3 months later, he lost his job. Officially, it was restructuring. In truth, everyone knew the collapse of his reputation had caught up with him. Professionally, personally, publicly, Holly didn't just leave Taylor. She erased him. One morning she packed her children, her things, and her pride, and vanished to Arizona with a new boyfriend. No forwarding address. No second chances. I heard the details later through Hunter. Taylor was scraping by now. Freelance consulting, barely enough to cover rent on a studio apartment. Driving a beat-up sedan that rattled when it turned corners. The man who once strutted through boardrooms, reshaping people's futures with a wave of his hand, was learning how to survive with nothing. Nothing but pride, and even that was fractured, bruised, unreliable. But the call came last month. Unexpected.
Direct.
His name lit up my phone. For the first time since the divorce, Taylor's voice filled my ear. It was small, stripped of the arrogance I'd known for decades. "Jordan," he said, pausing like the word itself hurt. "I know I have no right to ask you for anything, but I need to know, will you be at Hunter's engagement party?" The question stopped me cold. "Of course I will," I answered without hesitation. "He's my son." "I want to come too," he said quietly. "But not if it makes you uncomfortable. I know I lost the right to claim space at our children's milestones. Still, I'd like to try. To rebuild something with them, if that's even possible." I sat in my kitchen, staring out the window at the garden where his golf clubs had once leaned against the wall. A year ago, I might have struck hard. I might have thrown every mistake, every betrayal, back at him. But the woman I had become didn't need his pain to validate my healing. "Taylor," I said finally, "Hunter and Faith are grown. Their relationships with you are theirs to decide. I won't be the reason you can't try." When the engagement party arrived, October dressed itself in perfection. Crisp air. A sky so blue it looked painted. The kind of day that whispers possibility. I wore a navy dress that felt like confidence stitched into fabric. Paired it with the pearl earrings my mother once clasped onto my ears before high school dances. I drove with the windows down, music pulsing, air filling my lungs. The country club buzzed with warmth and laughter. Hunter stood tall in a charcoal suit, his arm linked with Sarah's. She glowed in champagne silk, a light in her eyes that matched his. They moved together easily, pausing to hug friends, to laugh with family, to accept blessings for a future they clearly believed in. Taylor arrived halfway through cocktail hour. I saw him before he saw me, standing in the doorway, scanning the crowd like a man unsure of his place. He'd lost weight. His hair carried more gray than memory had recorded. His suit was carefully chosen, though it couldn't disguise the wear in his shoulders. Hunter spotted him first. I held my breath, searching my son's face, waiting for anger, bracing for rejection. But what I saw instead was something softer. Not forgiveness. Not yet. But a loosening. The edges of rage worn down into something more complicated. Hunter walked toward him, Sarah by his side. They spoke quietly. Then, To my surprise, Hunter introduced Sarah to his father, the man who had missed so much of their love story. Minutes later, Faith joined them. She stood poised, guarded, but she stayed. I watched from across the room as my children made their own choices about redemption. They were polite, respectful, not warm, not cold, neutral. Taylor's place in their lives would have to be earned slowly, carefully, one conversation at a time. And there was no guarantee. Later, I stepped outside onto the terrace. The golf course stretched out before me, the same course where Taylor had once wasted Saturdays while I folded laundry alone. The irony tasted sweet. Here I was, standing tall in the world he used to dominate, while he remained inside, trying to salvage connections he had set on fire for someone who never truly knew him. Clayton appeared at my side, holding 2 glasses of champagne. "How are you holding up?" he asked, handing one to me. I took it, thought about it, and answered honestly. "Better than fine."
Good.
"Really, genuinely good." He smiled. "You've earned it." Through the tall glass windows, I watched Hunter and Sarah cut their cake, laughter rising like music. Faith snapped photos, her face lit with joy. And Taylor, he stood a little apart, uncertain, grateful just to have been allowed in the room. This was my new life. Not perfect, but honest. Built not on pretense, not on compromise, but on choices I had made for myself. I understood something now. The best revenge isn't destruction. It's reconstruction. Not tearing down the one who hurt you, but building something stronger out of what they left behind. The woman I was last Thanksgiving had been terrified of losing everything. The woman I was now knew the truth. Sometimes losing everything is simply another way of saying, you're free. Free to choose. Free to begin again. And standing there on that terrace, the horizon stretched before me, wide with promise.
Mine. Entirelei mine.